I want to welcome everyone today to today's session. And before we get started, if you can't see my screen, please let us know. I've been known not to show the screen till about 2 or 3 slides in. So I want to make sure that everyone's able to see it. Today's presentation starts out from a website perspective. We've been doing a series of webinars around best practices and considerations for law firms in and around their website. But the reality is that in today's world, we no longer can think about just web as the only channel of engagement with our clients and our prospects. So we've broadened the subject today. Hopefully you folks will still find this to be of great value. And we believe that anyone that is thinking about their website will also probably want to think about some of these other channels and how they complement each other in support of your objectives as a marketer. So I want to start by providing a little bit of background about eDynamic and how we come to present these type of webinars. We've been doing work in the digital space for nearly a decade. We have a strong background in both the marketing side as well as the technology side. So we really look at what it takes to do digital marketing both from a strategy and practice perspective as well as understanding the underlying platforms necessary to support what we want to get done as digital marketers. Over the last few years, we've been heavily involved in one of our vertical practices, which is in law. Law firms, we do a lot of work with some of the top tier firms in the AmLaw 20 space, Law 50 space, and have done a lot of work not only from a web perspective, but holistically around their overall digital platforms. So that involves web, email, social, analytics, and a variety of other supporting platforms within that ecosystem. So today, we want to focus on a couple key things that we have learned during our journey as we spend time with firms, and also things that we've learned as we spend time with other industries. So we do spend a lot of time in financial services with companies like American Express, in a variety of other organizations. We spend time in the high-tech sector with organizations like Dell and so on, and also in manufacturing. All of these organizations have the same problem that a law firm does, which is about acquiring new customers or new clients, being able to engage with them in the long term, grow brand loyalty, and then be able to support them. And all of these organizations have a desire to do that cost effectively and to do that in the most optimal manner possible. Digital platforms, vis-a-vis offline tools like ads and, display ads and things like that, do provide us with a tremendous tool set for the marketer to leverage to be cost effective and very engaging with their client base. So today we're going to cover a few areas that we've picked. There's really 100 different subjects to talk about, but these are some of the things that we've recently encountered. We thought it'd be very important to communicate with you. Some of these subjects we've dealt with in the past, but over the year, a lot of things are changing very quickly. We want to revisit some of these. And the first one that falls into that category is mobile. Some of the changes that have occurred in mobile really have occurred just within the last 1.5 to 2 years. With the advent of the iPad and various other tablets, the tablet as not only as a form factor, but in the way that people engage with the web, per se, really is changing how people perceive a website should work, what that interaction should look like, and what their expectations are from websites as they begin to engage with them. So here's a very telling statistic, is that no one screen size has more than 20% of the market share, which is really telling about where we need to think about our websites showing up. And there's a lot of things that we need to consider in terms of where the direction of mobile devices are going and how we need to begin to support them. Still, the majority of people still access the web through the desktop, laptop devices, but mobile devices, both smartphones and tablets, are growing significantly as being one of the only ways that many people engage with the web. Last year we heard a lot of people speak, pundits in the industry as well as our clients, mobile, mobile, mobile. And there was a real effort of getting sites onto mobile. And we see mobile now as very much a baseline. In other words, that becomes nothing more than table stakes at this point, to kind of be at the table and engage with your clients. People are looking for responsive websites, so sites that adapt to different screen sizes very naturally. They're looking for mobile browser support as you get down to smaller form factor devices that have browsers specific to them. They want to make sure that your site is working very cleanly in those devices. But now, with tablet coming on, we're adding another layer of expectations. People engage with a tablet differently than they do with other devices. They look to be able to do things like swipe and touch and move and drag. And it's very different than using a mouse because your finger is involved, and you don't necessarily have this notion of double clicking and things like that. So there's a completely new set of engagement paradigms that are being brought to bear here. And when we look at mobile sites, things like responsive design, again, should be something we're all moving toward very quickly. Mobile browser support, that should be a no-brainer. But then as we begin to think about things like gesture support, the ability to swipe, pinch, and drag things on your tablet, a lot of that comes from the applications that people are building, but now that's moving toward websites as well. So there's going to be a lot of new expectations set there. The other thing that tablet users are looking for is around kind of response time. And for whatever reason that is, they're expecting faster load times and better response than even desktop sites. So these are things, again, nothing that we have control over, but really just the expectations that are being set in people's minds as they begin to use applications that are very quick and very responsive, snappy in how they interact, and then they move to a website. They're looking for a lot of that same responsiveness. The other thing is when people are using fingers versus a mouse, which is very fine, being able to select very small, detailed lines and tags that you can drag, a finger is a bit more clumsy, It requires a lot more room in terms of real estate. And so as we begin to look at designing for these other devices, we need to take that into account. So larger fonts, spacing between buttons and links, because sometimes you click on a link, I know how it must be, you clicked on the wrong link just because your finger touched the link above it. So those are things we want to be cognizant of as we begin to design sites for this new medium. So a quick takeaway around this. Clearly, tablets are introducing a new way that people are interacting with the web. The experience that we have on tablets is actually bleeding over to other devices. So with Windows 8, whether it's a success at the moment or not, I'm sure that touch-based devices in a laptop form factor, those that include keys and a touchpad and maybe a mouse, tablets, type touchscreens will be here to stay as we move forward. So because of that, I think that we need to gear ourselves up toward that direction, realizing that that's going to be a common way people interact with the two-dimensional page on their screen. So hopefully that was interesting, quite an eye-opener for a lot of organizations as they begin to think about how to move from mobile now into much more of an engaging environment on tablets. Now we move to a slightly different subject. You know, we work with a lot of firms where one of the first things that comes up is how much time they want to spend on the homepage. Because from their perspective, they see the homepage as being the most important element, if you will, on their site. And we do agree that a homepage does define the brand, it defines how you want to engage, it positions the organization. It is, for many people, the front door to your firm. But what's been happening over time is through the use of other mechanisms like search and social and blogs and so on, how people are getting to your site is changing. Many folks are not entering your URL, your address, to get and land on the homepage first. So recently, an individual who had a blog put together kind of an analysis of some top sites. So looking across a variety of industries, looking at some of the key sites around news and information and a variety of other things like that. How do people typically hit these sites? What they found is that less than 15% on average of people actually go to the homepage for their information. They're usually coming in as what's known as the side door of the site, which means they're coming to another page and completely bypassing their homepage. So the key reasons for that is, as I mentioned before, a lot of it is coming through a variety of referrals. Now, what I've done here is took 3 of some of the top AmLaw 10 sites. I haven't named them here. You could probably look this up yourself. But if you look at the top row there, we've got 3 different firms. And if we look at the numbers associated with that, this is how people are coming to their site. So in terms of upstream referrals, you know, we're looking at 20, 40, 25, 30+% of the referrals coming to the site through search engines. That's a huge number. And what that typically means is that they've done some search that leads them to your site, but they probably haven't typed in, for instance, in the bottom, Baker McKenzie, the largest firm in the U.S. currently. We pulled something out of SEMrush. Now note, all of these are publicly available. You can do this on your own. You can go to alexa.com and do a lookup there, or SEMrush, and do a lookup on your own site, which I would recommend. And here, clearly, the top organic keywords, how people are getting to the site, is through a variety of keywords that do not lead them to the homepage, which is a very important thing to understand here. So if we look at the homepage, if we're just thinking about people coming to the homepage and staying on the homepage and engaging, what we're finding is that we have anywhere from 43, 71, 35% bounce rates. The one in the middle is particularly high. I'm not going to diagnose that at the moment, but that's pretty scary. So again, this information is available for you. You can enter your own URL, and you can begin to understand where you fit into the spectrum. With that said, you know, if people are not coming to your homepage and they're coming in through the side door, how do we actually optimize that engagement when they're coming in through the side door? Well, let's talk about that a bit. You know, one of the things that gets people in through the side door is that search engine, right? It's Google, it's Bing, it might be Yahoo still for some folks. And one of the things that we begin to look at is how we align our content, how we focus our SEO strategy, so we can actually pull more people into our site rather than less. So one of the challenges that anyone has from an SEO perspective is for things like keywords, everyone's competing for the same keywords. So if you had a practice that had to deal with corporate law, you know, corporate law is not something that's going to be very compelling to drive a person to your site. It's very likely that a variety of other organizations are using that, purchase that, and so on, and it's going to be very competitive. Now, if you focus on something that is much more specific, and this is referred to as the long tail, meaning that as we see that stretch out to the right, those are searches that are done by the majority of people looking for something very specific. Now, if our content is written in such a manner that speaks to whatever is in the mind's eye of that individual that they've just entered into Google, what we have is really a big opportunity for us to pull them to our website. So we do a lot of work with people to begin to think that through from an SEO perspective, to focus on long tail terms. It might be very specific. It might be, you know, corporate law, but it might be in aviation. It might be some really sub-category that's specific to the aviation industry, for example. The other part of that is when they come to your site, what page are they coming to? They could be coming to a bio page. Maybe an attorney has written a background about certain cases, experience that they have, and so on, various matters that they've been engaged in. It could be an article. It could be a thought leadership page. In any of these, one of the things we want to do is, again, think about the SEO side, but then also think about once they hit that page, how are we going to engage them? How are we going to get them to take that next step? And in many ways, we may want to be fairly explicit, where if they came to that page, and we can tell with modern tools, we can tell how they came to that page, whether they navigated to the page or were referred to the page through a Google link. If they came there via Google link, we'll want to take advantage of that search and that presence of mind that they have at the moment, which is, I'm looking for information. I came to this page, and hopefully they can help me solve my problem. And if you can, if you speak to them correctly on that page, hopefully they'll take the next step. And one of the things we want to look at is providing a way for them to take action. So a call to action for them to do that. So instead of making these pages static, let's start thinking about how to engage that person and pull them through and start that ongoing dialogue. So there's a couple key takeaways. You know, if we're thinking about pages, whatever they are, again, think about being very clear and concise in terms of the value. You know, even as an attorney, if you have a bio, you know, what is your value? What are the problems that you're solving for people? You know, and also call to action. Have things stand out. So instead of having the little box that takes their email kind of sit in the background, have that stand out. Make sure that they are given that mechanism. The other is then leveraging that long tail. You know, thinking about the keywords, thinking about integrating that as part of your content strategy, and even encouraging attorneys to do the same. Now, we're not going to get into a lot of details here, but there are some excellent tools out there that both some of these SEO organizations, SEO Moz, as well as Google provide to help you identify key words and key phrases that are long-tail phrases that are less competitive but also have high value to people. Things that people are looking at because they've entered that into Google. They may not find information behind it, but we know that people are looking for it. And there's trending that you can look at around that. So great tools out there for you to use. Let's take a look at a few other things as we kind of change gears a little bit. We're going to talk about how we begin to get personal with people. And in the last area, we talked about, people might be coming in because they've done a search, coming in that side door, landing on a page. Perhaps it's a thought leadership page. Perhaps it's a bio page. How do we take that a step further? If we know about what they're looking for, how do we begin to speak to them at where they're at, where they are currently in their thought process, and where they are in terms of what they're looking for? So one of the things that we spend a lot of time with our clients is around this notion of personalization. And it's rarely a big bang. It's typically something that becomes a journey that we work with our clients over time because it takes a lot of forethought. It takes a lot of understanding of your client base and then also how they want to engage with you. But personalization can really provide significant lift in terms of how much engagement you have with your clients and how much of that conversion will occur, for instance, for them to take action with you. So how do we get started with conversion? What does this really mean? So personalization, getting started with it, as I said, is about a journey. There's a lot of things that you may already know that you can leverage immediately. There's other things that you may have to work toward that you begin to sit down with other folks, both practice management folks, biz dev folks, the marketing team sits down together and kind of talks this through and begins to understand how you want to engage and position yourself to certain segments. So some of the things that we look at is things like user profiles and preferences. That's the most simple thing that we can understand, and that really is around what we call explicit personalization. And we call it explicit personalization because it's about things we really know. We're not guessing. They're not hinting. It's things that we really know about that individual. And the reason being is if they have a profile, that means they've registered with you on your website, so they could probably receive an email on a monthly basis. Maybe you have a newsletter. Maybe they've registered for alerts around certain subject matter, or maybe they want to, they're a client and they've registered, they've provided some information, they're part of your deal room, and they're working with an existing on an existing case. There may be a lot of reasons why you have information about these people. But that information, depending on what you've asked, can be highly actionable. It allows you to begin to tailor your emails, for instance, in a way that begins to provide them with more details and options around information they're interested in. So if you provided them with a list of potential subject matter that they've checked off in a box as when they registered, we can act on that now. And we talked about cross-channel. So we can personalize the web experience, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the tools that are out there from a content management perspective that enable us. But we also want to think about how to personalize the email experience. Why send the exact same email to every one of your clients? I'm sure each one of them has a different interest, different problems to solve, different things on their mind. And this type of insight will allow us to both not only control how we engage with them on the web, but also then how we engage with them in email. So let's talk about some of the more we talk about explicit personalization, let's talk about some of the more implicit things. So things like the history. So what they've done on your site. If you incorporate analytics, whether that's Google Analytics, whether that's analytics built into your CMS, whether that's an external analytics tool that you might be using like an Omniture or Unica, you can gather information through reports and other mechanisms that will begin to inform how to engage with your clients. Now that's definitely a little bit more work, but it is something that we do with our clients quite regularly. And there's a huge benefit there in terms of beginning to align content that you have with them as they come to your website. So it becomes much more conversational, and the experience they have is in alignment with where they are and what they're looking for. Other things, of course, more explicit, again, if things were tagged in a campaign, they click on a link, you can obviously track those things. Immediate behaviors, there's a lot of tools out there now from a CMS perspective that as people move through the site, we can capture that and act on that immediately. And then there's something that we're going to touch on a little later in today's webinar, and that's around this notion of client lifecycle. We're very big on that, and it's one of the ways, it's kind of a thought framework that we use in understanding the firm's client base and how to engage with them across their life cycle, which also begins to inform us, for instance, if they're a new client versus an existing client is like the most obvious thing. We may want to engage with them very differently, even though both have registered for an email. So for us, personalization is about getting the right message to them at the right time, and also now on the right device. So we believe that there's a real need to kind of bring that all together. And here's some really simple examples, two firms that we've worked with. In one case, down in the footer, what we've done is provided a way for the local office information to show up automatically based on location. So if you're on the West Coast, and this firm happens to have a Palo Alto office, you're going to see the Palo Alto office. If you happen to be in the New York vicinity, you're going to see New York. If you're in Philly, you're going to see Philly, in Boston, and so on. And so there's a real ability to kind of localize that information, because in many cases, if you're coming to a website, maybe you want to give them a call. There's the phone number. There's the address. Key things that people are looking for when they come to your site, they're right there. The most simple example of personalization. Here's another example of personalization. We worked with a firm called Denton's just recently and launched their site. In this case, they had a real desire to kind of personalize a page that is based on a variety of overlapping interests. So one would be the practice, the industry, and then the location. So in this case, we provided an interactive tool that allowed a person to very explicitly, while they're on the website, basically tell us, you know, I'm interested in this practice, I'm in this industry, and I'm in Europe in this case. And dynamically then, we identify all the people. They have access to the bios behind here, of course. We provide the description of that practice group within the European team. So again, that's very explicit, but it's in real time and provides them that information that they're looking for packaged in a ready-to-go fashion. So two very simple examples of personalization. So as I said before, personalization is a journey. It can get very sophisticated, and there are some diminishing returns at a certain point, of course. But we want to make sure that we get going with this. We start thinking about the simple things we can do, like the previous examples. And in one area, you know, returning customers should always be treated that way. If you have a client that's come back, you should be able to recognize that client. client. You should be able to acknowledge them, and you should, based on any previous preferences that they've identified, be able to show them content that is interesting to them. If you have a webinar coming up or other events coming up that are specific to the interests of that individual, why would you show a general list of events? Okay? So there is really a need to get that alignment, and it provides people with some level of assurance that you're listening to them. It's a two-way street. The other is geography. We showed that. You know, there's a lot of great examples, both from the ones that we did, but, you know, hotels and hospitality do a great job at that. There's a lot to be learned from these other industries and how they engage with their clientele. And then specifically for B2B firms, those of you that have practices that are in support of business, you know, starting with the vertical market becomes a no-brainer. You know, if people come in and say, you know, I'm interested in oil and gas, great. Let's begin to build the story around oil and gas for them. Next time they come back, we'll definitely be showing some thought leadership around the oil and gas industry if they happen to come back to the homepage or land on an attorney page or some other page. We can update that right rail of calls to action and other information that is specific to their needs and their desires. And there's quite a few tools out there that allow us to do that now. Some of them are built in to the content management system. Other tools are third-party. There's an organization that we've used called Demandbase. Great tool. People come to the site, it does an IP lookup, and really returns to you a very full and rich record about the company, SIC code, any number of information that becomes highly actionable for you from a personalization perspective. So moving on, if we do want to get more sophisticated, and I've made reference to content management system, there's a wide variety of tools out there from a content management perspective, and also from an email marketing automation perspective for that matter, that provide rules-based personalization where you can set up triggers as a marketer. Doesn't require coding. Allows you to set up triggers for certain things to occur based on the fact that, you know, they clicked on this, they clicked on this, they clicked on this. We give them a certain score that they are in oil and gas because of the number of pages they looked at or the documents they've downloaded. So once they have that score, when they come back or return, we'll be able to act on it and say, oh, Joe is in oil and gas. Let's show him some great new articles that we have around oil and gas. There's persona-based personalization, and this gets more sophisticated, meaning that we could define basic personas around people. So an obvious one is client versus prospect. That might be very obvious. But there might be some other stages in between, and there might be other things that we want to incorporate as part of the persona. And these systems can do, it looks like a CEO in the oil and gas industry versus it looks like an engineer in the oil and gas industry. Why would that matter? Well, maybe the engineer is interested in IP law versus the CEO might be interested in other concerns. Cross-channel personalization, really providing contextualization. And this goes back to the previous discussion touching on the fact that email and marketing automation systems have some of these capabilities as well, depending on their sophistication, and that if we can get a good picture across all of these channels from an analytics perspective, then all the channels can benefit and seeing the customer from that one perspective. And that's really what we're after, is creating a sense of coherency and consistency across the channels. And if we can do that in a personalized manner, even better. So let's talk a little bit more about cross-channel. We touched on that earlier. It's clear that cross-channel is very important to marketers now. We know not everyone goes to a website to get the information they need. We have people now, of course, even in the B2B space, that look to LinkedIn. Some folks even go to Facebook to get information. Others go to communities. Others go to other, birds of a feather social groups to get their information. But the reality is that doing true cross-channel marketing from a digital perspective becomes very difficult, and many marketers say they're really not prepared. They're still dealing with some of the key issues they have with their website. Then they're dealing with email, let alone some of the new things coming in and around social. So what does this mean? Most marketers really think they're doing a great job if they say, yep, we got a mobile strategy. We're touching them with mobile. We got a mobile site up. Yeah, and we're even thinking about building an app. Someone says, yeah, they get emails every month. We send them emails, and our registrations are going up. That's working. And then someone else says, yeah, we've got a couple blogs. We've got an attorney over here who has his own blog. He's got his microsite. We've got a practice group over here that's doing this. And, we're thinking about, and so on. And the digital marketer's perspective really is the fact, hey, I've got the platform in place. I'm getting information out. I'm touching and engaging the customer. I am now cross-channel. What we're finding is that the perspective from the client tends to be very different. So when we look at it from a client's perspective, they're looking at it from their day-to-day perspective. If you think about the client, they may, on the East Coast, they may be coming in on the train. Guy in LA is stuck in traffic. He glances at his smartphone every once in a while. Not that he should, but that's the way it is. So they're getting their email on the tablet. They're in meetings. They engage with the web, want to look something up. Perhaps they sign up for Twitter. They're getting a Twitter feed from you. They're at lunch, see something interesting. Then they come back to their desktop, maybe click through on the Twitter feed, and also see an email show up from you. And then they want to go home and do some more research. From their perspective, they don't know that you're thinking about web, email, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is. They're engaging with you as a brand. And from their perspective, the channel disappears. What they want to see is you. They want to understand how your firm comes through to them as a single brand across all channels very seamlessly. And so there becomes this often a disconnect where people get siloed. Even messaging and branding gets siloed to a platform or to a channel, and it becomes very obvious to many of the clients that engage with that brand that it is that siloed. So what we want to do is really think about things from their perspective. And one of the things that we want to think about is, if your customer is in financial services, or if your customer is in high tech, your website is not the only website they would go to. Your email is not the only email that they receive. What other emails have they signed up for in their industry? What is the level or the benchmark that's set in their industry? That is actually what you're competing with from a brand perspective, from an engagement perspective. So when they begin to say, hey, I'm getting these emails from XYZ high-tech company, I'm a high-tech company, for example, these are great. Thought leadership they're pushing out to me. I click on it. I come to their website. Now they're sending me more information that's specific to my needs. The whole experience that they get is how they begin to judge other brands that they engage with. So I know many of our clients sit down with us and say, we'd love to benchmark ourselves against some of the other big firms that are out there. And we begin to sit down with them and actually say, who are your clients and what did they benchmark you against? That's the thought that we need to really think about here. So, delivering across channels, again, very much like personalization, is not a big bang. Just because you purchase, that Marketo or that Eloqua or Ticket or whatever it might be, and you're now you're doing a great job on email, is probably just the beginning of where we must go. We work a lot with folks to kind of bring these together both strategically and operationally. And the challenges really are, being available to your clients. If they want to find you on their tablet device and your emails don't show up well on their tablet, or your website doesn't render well, that becomes a challenge. Getting visibility across the channels, they want to find you wherever they're currently at. Other things like the outdated technologies. We know that there's a lot of firms that have a mix of technologies, a mix of kind of proprietary tools that they may have, and getting off of them is one of the steps to getting on this journey. So we want you to kind of think through this, and there's a lot of steps involved. The other one is, again, providing a way to listen across all the channels. And it goes back to the analytics. For us to do that personalization, for us to actually provide a cross-channel experience that is seamless, we do have to think about how we're going to measure the engagement across those channels, not just the web, and how we're going to improve and optimize each one of those channels so that holistically we do a better job of engaging them. So thinking about, the takeaways here, what channels are most effective for you? What are the ones that people are using? And you probably can find a lot of that out now. Some of it you may not have insight, but it's very important to understand to which channel you want to attribute success. Is the web driving a lot of your lead flow and engagement? Is it email? What are people doing on mobile devices? We really need to begin to understand that, to understand where we're going to spend our time to begin to optimize that engagement. Which channels or platforms are people using conjointly, meaning that, are people moving from, let's say, Twitter feed and then clicking through to your website? Are people getting an email, just reading your email, or are they clicking through to your website? Then, when they're on your website and there's a call to action that speaks to them, are we capturing more information from them, maybe through progressive profiling, and then sending them that next email that's based on the actions they took? All, again, very personalized. And, this is a very telling statistic here. According to Forrester, 57% of marketers measure each of their channels, again in silos, but only 28% of them measure them one against the other. And that's really the challenge for a lot of folks here. Okay, so moving to our last subject, we're going to talk about thinking like a client. And we've kind of had that discussion all the way along. It's really taking a client-based perspective or a client-centric perspective when we think about cross-channel engagement, when we think about mobile, when we think about getting personal with the client from an engagement perspective. So what we're seeing, and this comes from McKinsey, one of the largest, most respected management consulting firms here in the States. 50% of marketing spend is misaligned with the needs of the client and the decision journey of that client. So that's a pretty significant statement. That means 50% are very likely the dollars that you're spending, that you think you're spending correctly, are not effective. So forget about some of the things that we were talking about in terms of channel alone and personalization alone. We're just talking about where that person is, that prospect is, in their decision journey as they make a decision for your firm versus someone else. are you speaking to them with the right message when they are at a certain point in that journey? So one of the things that we do with law firms, with financial services firms, with manufacturing, with high tech, it really does not matter, is again, we begin to think about how that client or that customer makes their way through the journey. Now, some of these steps in the journey, the stages in the journey may change slightly, but face it, all of us go through, whether we're buying a new car or making a decision to engage with a professional services firm, we go through this process of creating awareness. We understand we have a problem. We begin our search. We might go on Google. We may talk to friends and colleagues and begin to understand what our options are. And then we go through the evaluation. You know, we're looking at 2 or 3 firms that we might want to do business with. And then finally we make a commitment. And then, you know, from the perspective of the person, we need to satisfy them. You know, we want a case for them, for example, or something. And then we want to grow that relationship. So what we tend to do is really look at this from both a digital marketing perspective and a digital marketing technology perspective. There's certain things we want to get done, and believe me, this is a limited list that we see here. But there's a variety of ways we may want to engage with them. You know, social, SEO through the web, content marketing campaigns, in various platforms that will be necessary to support those. Content management, email marketing automation, the CRM in the background, maybe it's interaction, maybe you decided to go with something else. All of these are working together in support of this. So the client life cycle really begins to help us understand how we begin to engage with them. Because if we think about each step of that journey, we will probably, for search, when they first come to our website, we will want to engage with them very differently than when they're going through the evaluation phase. How, you know, and this goes back to personalization. We talked about life cycle and context of personalization. Now we're actually working with clients where we begin to map this out, where we begin to identify the personas around people within different industries that are making their way through this journey, so that we can have a content strategy, an SEO strategy, a thought leadership strategy across channels that engages with them along this journey. And that becomes a very different approach than not thinking about that journey at all and just putting out one type of engagement with that person. So again, here, focus on those points in the decision journey where they can be most successful in influencing that decision that you want them to make. So here's some of the things that we do. One of them is really prioritizing your objectives and your spending. You know, begin to understand kind of where you're getting some of these people to make decisions. And some of this can come from, you know, maybe the business development folks, maybe some of the rainmakers within your organization. If they're willing to open up to you and begin to talk to you about their experience, because before digital even existed, they've had to have that relationship all the way through. And they got them from a prospect to where they're doing business with your firm. And so they have an understanding of what it is, what are those triggers, and where in that journey people are making decisions and how to influence those. We can now do that digitally through a variety of mechanisms. So then we think about tailoring the message. You know, if we understand where we need to get the content, at what time, what content is it that we need to get to? As I said, it's not just putting up one piece of content that becomes the engagement around a practice. Maybe you want to think about targeting for different people at different times for that practice. Investing in client-driven marketing. This goes back to looking at those online tools, you know, looking across those channels, and then integrating all the client-facing activities. So that means that when someone within the practice engages with that person, perhaps they did pick up the phone and call an attorney. Hopefully, they'll be kind enough to update Interaction or your whatever the CRM of choice is to let you know that that occurred. And that we begin to have visibility into both the online interactions with the client and the offline interactions with the client, because they also begin to inform us where we are in that engagement with them. So again, a few takeaways here. Marketers traditionally have been looking at certain parts of the journey, often looking at the beginning, how do we fill the funnel? Biz dev says, we need to get more people in there, we need to get more events, we need to get more people to call. Or they've been looking at the very end, looking at the conversion, all right, Mr. Rainmaker, let's get this going. Are you following up on the leads that I gave you? But, there's that whole range in between that we often just ignore. And kind of nurturing those people along with the right communications, and that's what we want to look at. Instead of looking at the endpoints, let's think of that journey holistically. Then the other thing is, understanding how we begin to influence the decision. I think that really comes from talking to people that have done that in an offline manner, and then taking those experiences and beginning to translate that into a digital engagement through thought leadership, through calls to action, through personalization on the page, both via email, via the web, and Twitter, other mechanisms that you use to target people. So again, those are some of the areas that we look at ourselves with our clients. So folks, thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation, and I think that what we're going to do now is leave it open for some questions, and I think Kamya is going to moderate those questions for us. Hello, Kamya. Do we have any questions from the audience? So it may not be that
hi,
we
Rob.
have.
We do
Hi.
have a few questions.
Oh, okay, great.
Hi, Rob. Yeah. So the first question is it possible to integrate the web personalization to CRM systems like Salesforce?
Yeah, it definitely is. So typically, web personalization will be handled within a content management system. They may have their own rules-based engine. Very popular tools like a Sitecore and Ektron, Adobe CQ5, even Drupal, all have various mechanisms built in to do personalization. And all of them also provide a way for us to act on information. There are integrations between those platforms and various both marketing automation systems and CRM systems that would allow us to, often in real time, make a personalization decision and serve up the appropriate content. Many times those need to be custom integrations because those connectors do not yet exist. So it depends on the platform that you have on both sides. So if you have Interaction and you've got a variety of any of the CMS platforms, there may not be an out-of-the-box connector for that, for example. Whereas if you had Salesforce, perhaps someone had already built a connector. So again, it will very much depend on the platforms that you have on both ends. Are there any additional questions?
All right, Ross, the next question is, yeah, we have a few coming up. The next question would be, how should firms staff to handle multi-channel marketing and life cycle marketing challenges?
That's a very good question, and it is something that we address when we engage with firms and just companies in general. One of the biggest challenges that we have from a cross-channel perspective is not that they don't have the right tools in place. A lot of firms have made the investments, but the way they are organized is that, hey, see that group over there? That's the email group. We're the web group. And that immediately, that organizational structure, as we stated during the webinar, is not how your client sees you. They don't see the web group. They don't see the email group. They see your brand. So one of the things that we recommend is really bringing together the cross-channel team to work together from a planning perspective and from a strategic perspective. The reality is things like content planning, content strategy, all of that needs to be done from a cross-channel perspective. There are things, of course, from an implementation perspective, both from email, web, social, whatever that is, that becomes channel specific. But from strategy, content, branding perspective, that has to be done consistently across all of those channels. So the folks that lead out from a strategy and a content perspective, you know, those that define, you know, what that editorial calendar might be, you know, creating various thought leadership, you know, requesting help from various folks in the firm to get that written, writing some pieces themselves, writing new content, whatever that is, they do that across all the channels. Then they may have other folks, as I said, that may focus on implementing that. So, again, very different than a siloed approach. Is there another question?
Yes, Raul, we do have a few more questions coming in, but I guess we'll just be able to take one more.
Okay.
So the question is, can we track, how do we track social media activities through CMS?
That may not be possible.
Muted.
Social media activity typically is not tracked through a content management system. There are tools that are out there, tools like HubSpot, tools like Radian6, listening tools that are able to look across a variety of different social channels to look for activity across the channels, both from your firm, your competitors, and perhaps clients. And so those platforms begin to inform, you know, what is occurring out across those various social channels. CMS really is a very separate channel, and you know, the tools that are in CMS typically will not have the visibility into broader social channels that are out there.
Thank you, Raul. There are a few more questions coming in, but we'll have to get back to them after the webinar.
Absolutely. Folks, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Feel free to contact us. We'll obviously be invited to the next webinar that we hope to have within a few months, and we look to have you join again. Thank you again. Bye-bye.